Hello, this is the podcast from the international research platform SIMM, with reports and interviews from across the world on the role music can play in social and community programs. I am Lucas Perron. In this podcast episode, I talk with Samuel Araujo about research on the role music can have in social and community projects in Brazil. Samuel Araujo is a PhD in musicology from the University of Illinois. He's professor of ethnomusicology at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro. He published a lot of books, articles, and CDs also in Brazil and other countries, dealing with, among other subjects, music and politics, theory and methodology in ethnomusicology, as well as on models of participatory research. Hello, Samuel Araujo. So glad to have you in the podcast with us. You've been following what SIMM, the research platform, is doing since several years, helping to give support to research on practice involving music in social work. And I would like to know how this is being developing in your region. And I hear it is practice, but also research in this field.
Yes, first of all, Lucas, thank you very much for the invitation, for being here. It's a great pleasure to follow the accomplishments of the SIMM platform in all these years. And it is an honor to be chatting here with you as we share, I think, many concerns regarding the power of music making to produce effective social changes, positive social changes. And this has been this sort of concern with the relationships between music and mitigating or overcoming the huge social problems we have in a subcontinent like Latin America. A long-standing concern among researchers, university researchers, among musicians all over Latin America. I'm taking your invitation to speak in name of a region as an invitation to speak about Latin America in particular.
Yes.
Even though I have an experience that transcends this region. So
I will be. I'm sorry to say, I will be able to interview also some colleagues, some friends from Colombia.
Wonderful. Yes, this is another country I know relatively well. This has been a concern, as I was saying, for a long time. I mean, since at least the 1960s, there have been several university professors, performers, and so on, who have collaborated in joint initiatives towards producing knowledge on the power of music, or the shortcomings too of music, to accomplish certain social goals, positive social goals, in the sense of transformations these scholars, these musicians, sometimes also public administrators, felt were urgent in terms of Latin American history. So many social differences, economic differences, inequalities, and so on and so forth. So this question, how music can contribute or not to mitigating or overcoming these problems, has been a long-standing concern in this region as a whole.
When we think of Latin America in terms of SIMM practice, social impact music projects, I think many people would first think of the famous Sistema project in Venezuela.
Right.
I know that that Sistema has inspired many people outside of Venezuela to start similar practice, but adapted to the very different contexts. And
as I was saying, this theme for good or for worse, has been a long-standing concern. So there have been some, every once in a while, claims that some sort of project, music-related project, is producing positive effects and so on in some parts of Latin America. Some of these are government supported, some of these are local initiatives, some of these are local governments trying to intervene positively in their realities and so on. But this has been sort of a tricky question, so to speak, in the sense that you can have positive effects which are not accounted for, and some negative effects which are somehow clothed as they were positive impacts, you know. And so there is a wide range of possibilities when you think.
Can you give some examples?
Yes, well, the El Sistema initiative, for instance. You can hardly imagine in a continent like Latin America a program that starts with a neoliberal government, a governmental program that starts with a neoliberal government. The country goes through a radical change in terms of its politics, its local politics, and this program is maintained, you know, by a radically different political perspective.
Yes.
I'm not trying to judge, I mean, either one of the perspectives and so on, but this is something really unusual. I mean, it depends on several factors of propaganda, of having indicators, reliable indicators to point at. This has been sort of raised by our colleague Geoffrey Baker very adequately, I think. We had a very interesting period of positive social, cultural policies between 2003 and 2016 in Brazil. Under progressive governments, successive progressive governments. And
your actual government is a bit different. Huh?
Right. Radically different, I would say. Oppositionally different. And one aspect of it, which was quite clear to everyone that somehow was following closely the developments which were being put into practice at the time, was the lack of indicators, of reliable indicators. You know, it's not always a product of a Machiavellic manipulation, you know, of data or something like that. It's something that stems from some kind of chronic inability of ours, I would say from the left, from the right, from the center, you know, to deal with indicators, concrete indicators or reliable indicators that can point at when a policy has actually succeeded or not, you know. So this is something to consider, because I think this is one of the main goals of the platform, of course. It is stated in the program of the SIMM platform, working critically on indicators and so on and so forth. And I think this is really something urgently needed, because what I feel generally, globally, not only in Latin America, is that the arts have been sort of fetishized in some ways, you know, to be presented as a tool for this mitigation and overcoming of social inequalities, social problems, and so on. And overall, I think that all this these ideas, these positive ideas about the impact of the arts,
Yes.
Should be really put into test, under more critical premises.
Yes.
I think this is something really needed.
Yes.
Right. So I think this is a great potential of a platform like SIMM.
Yes. Yes, we also see that more and more of the type of critical research that you now talk about is being developed in many different countries. And
right.
The question I have about this is that we think that it's really important that the research is be developed by local researchers, local scholars,
right.
and we wonder also how an international platform like SIMM can help in developing these local capacities of research. And can we discuss this a little bit? Because we see indeed local from Latin America. I know a few fine researchers developing research in the field of SIMM practice. We also see people like myself coming from the north and doing developing research in the south, like I did in Congo, and other people I know of from the UK going to Latin American countries developing research. And then, of course, also people from the south going to the north, like to the Guildhall School now in London, where you have a PhD in research on SIMM practice.
To look at Latin America as a place that could potentially dwell upon or benefit from cooperation with, let's say, Western European university or North American university, is perhaps true for many countries, but this is not the case of Brazil, for instance, that has a particular situation, I think. And the situation is that Brazil has had for a long time a certain structure for let's say research, applied research, which is a strong area in the fields of ethnomusicology and music education here in Brazil. I see the same happening in Colombia, but just to explore a small but significant difference between the cases of Brazil and Colombia. I've been working. I worked as an advisor to a program in Colombia that had, that concern of producing local impact, working with local institutions and local musicians and so on. It was a nationwide project in Colombia for 8 years at least, from 2008 to 2016. But with support from the Ministry of Culture, not from the Ministry of Education, right? Not from the Ministry of Science and Technology, by Consciências, the institution that leads with, grants for research and so on. And so here in Brazil, we have a different situation. I mean, we had support when we had the Ministry of Culture, from the Ministry of Culture, but our strongest support has been from the scientific development financing institutions, right? So we have research groups all over Brazil, even under this problematic government we have now that is cutting funds for universities and for research and so on. But still, we have research groups all over Brazil, a country with continental dimensions and so on, working under that premise, that the main concern is how music and the arts can help to mitigate and to ameliorate problems which are historically very dramatic in the country. So in Brazil, most of this kind of research is done by Brazilians, financed by Brazilian agencies even today. Under these budget cuts, the persecution of the universities by this extreme right-wing government, our current government, federal government. But even so, these programs are continuing, you know. And so we have this sort of complex and different situations from country to country, from region to region, right?
Yeah.
You can find some specific situation in a place like Puerto Rico that I know very well. This is considered North America already, but I still consider it Latin America, you know. And a quite different one in a place like Paraguay, perhaps more dependent on this kind of external collaboration, you know. And so we'll have to look deeper into these kinds of situations. I would like to address another aspect of your question, which is how European and North American or Japanese institutions can benefit from collaborations,
yes.
You know, from the knowledge produced in Latin America, in Africa, and Asia, and other places. And this has been happening, you know, as a participant of this kind of exchange, you know. This is a very interesting development, for instance, in the field of ethnomusicology. Applied ethnomusicology nowadays is led by people from what you could term sort of the third world, you know, in the old terminology, you know. And so the most interesting works, the most challenging works in terms of theory and methods and so on, have come from these places. Quite innovative, actually, research approaches and so on, and collaborations, development with musicians, with local communities and so on, developing from these perspectives that in principle would be considered perhaps sort of coming from a minor area of the academic world, you know. And this has been very interesting. For instance, I would mention the work of Sylvia Naninyonga Tamususu in Uganda. She has done an incredible work on how African music is received in Norway, for instance. You know, this is the kind of research, these new collaborations, innovative collaborations, in which now you have, let's say, a third world scholar going to, an industrialized area or country and so on, and doing research there.
Samuel, you know well what's going on in terms of research in your own country, SIMM research in Brazil. What kind of social impact is or should especially be looked at, studied at this point?
Yes, I see a very promising scenery, a very promising scenario in Brazil. As I said, for some time, at least 20 or 30 years, this concern with the social impact of music making and so on society, on the concrete problems of communities and so on and so forth, has been a major posture in our academic work around Brazil, in several parts of Brazil, from the Amazon to Rio Grande do Sul, in the far south. And so we have this is unusual too. We have a Brazilian Association for Ethnomusicology that meets regularly every 2 years. And so this work has also some sort of platform, an academic platform to discuss regularly.
Because also applied ethnomusicology is of great interest in your country.
I would
yes?
say that it's about 70% of what we do here. Almost every project here, whatever university you pick, has these close collaborations going on with communities, with musicians, with archives, with indigenous archives, archives in favelas. I myself carry on a research of that sort, that has produced in the time frame of 20 years a local archive housed in a community, in a favela community, and right now we are, taking pains to take care of it during the pandemics because we are not able to go there. We have at least 3 regular meetings there since 2004, just for you to have an idea. And we have all the visual materials, we have recordings, we have the articles we have produced, everything is there, the general name under which is mostly well known in the literature too is musicultura, music culture, something like that. And so all over Brazil, what I see is sort of a solid reality in terms of the universities having these close ties with local communities, with local musicians. And one project in particular has a more audacious approach to it, this is a project called The Meeting of Knowledges, led by a colleague, an anthropologist. He was a student of John Blacking in the 1980s, José Jorge de Carvalho. The Meeting of Knowledges has this ambitious goal, and it has accomplished to a great extent, of having local musicians and local communities teaching at universities and even receiving salaries commensurate to what an academic would earn, So this is quite unusual. This is an accomplishment that goes in the direction of producing concrete impacts on public policies, for instance, right? Because universities are sort of reviewing their hiring procedures, right? To hire someone who is a master in a traditional instrument or in a traditional repertoire. We just had yesterday a meeting of the professors all over Brazil who integrate this project. These are universities spread across Brazil. And so this is a highly ambitious project, in which these people spend one semester teaching, a regular course, with credits being accumulated by the students who enroll in these disciplines and so on. And so these are examples of how a more structured work on music and the social impact, on the social impact of music can contribute.
How is the connection between people doing research and people developing practice? Is that often good? Is it sometimes problematic? Or as we can see in different countries, often practitioners, in fact, who start to do research themselves and musicians who are...
Right.
How is that in Brazil?
Well, I would say that we have sort of surpassed. We have... gone beyond already those kinds of distinctions. You can, finance, for instance, a research project with money from scientific development, and include some sort of performance component into your projects,
Yes.
And so this is a quite concrete effect of how applied ethnomusicology, applied work, applied research has really impacted. I mean, all these scenarios, these academic scenarios, moving ahead of the conventional views of how an academic project should be configured.
So, if I understand well, the research activities are not at all being developed separate from the realities of practitioners, and and the interest of practitioners. So, in close collaboration with practitioners, and
not at all.
Yeah.
And these practitioners go to our academic meetings. I mean, they participate in roundtables and so on, sort of highlighting the potentials of performance of the body and so on.
Yeah, so that the research, which is meant to come to a better understanding of the practice, also serves those who are developing the practice.
Right, precisely.
If they are different persons, yes.
Right. How mind and body can contribute, to a better humanity, basically.
Thank you so much, Samuel.
Oh, thank you, Lucas.
SIMM is the initiative of scholars and practitioners from 7 different countries and 4 different continents who felt the growing need to find ways to bring together people interested in developing research on the possible role music can play in social and community music programs. Sound engineer and co-editor of this episode of the SIMM-podcast is musician Mariusz Radwanski. Please visit our website at simm-platform.eu.